Well, judgment is a combination of different skills. There's some level of discipline with developing judgment, the core analytic skills to notice the right things, ask the right questions, to break down things into parts and question them. The sort of structured critical thinking and problem solving skills. None of that is worth very much unless you also have just a rich library of experience to draw from. The discipline of critical thinking will get us so far, but that last bit at filling in the blanks is very much a human skill. If you look at the list of skills that you typically see as in most demand around the world, they are starting to resemble more and more sort of entry-level consulting skills. AI quietly turns us all into consultants of a sort.
Lately, it feels like every headline about technology is trying to predict what we'll lose. Our jobs, our security, even our ability to think. But after talking with today's guest, Craig Friedman, I walked away thinking a lot less about AI and more about us as humans. The world is changing rapidly. Technology is reshaping how we work. Careers are becoming less linear, and many of us are questioning who we are beyond what we do. But beneath all those headlines is something more universal: the human experience of developing judgment, navigating uncertainty, and finding the confidence to move forward. Today's episode is the first of the new MindBlend mini-series, The Human Side of Change. Across the next few conversations, we'll explore how change challenges us and how it can ultimately reshape us for the better. Welcome to MindBlend. I'm your host, Karen Chong. In each episode, I talk with people who have experienced something real, and we break down what made a difference, so you can see yourself and the world around you more clearly, spot what you might have been missing, and move through life with a clearer way forward. If you like what you're hearing, share with those around you and subscribe to MindBlend. You will help a lot in spreading the insights for anyone who can use them. Let's blend. So my guest today is Craig Friedman. Craig is a senior talent strategist at St. Charles Consulting Group and has spent 3 decades helping organizations develop people, leaders, and skills. He has advised global organizations through major shifts in work and learning, and is the author of Enterprise Skills Unlocked, a blueprint for building skills-based talent management. So today, we're exploring a question that's becoming more important as AI becomes more capable, and that is, what are the experiences that shape good judgment, and what happens if we stop having them? Craig, welcome to MindBlend.
Hi, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here.
My pleasure to talk to you. And it's so funny. Yesterday, I was responding to someone else's LinkedIn post, and he posted about how easy it is to just find things to learn how to do something. We're all always finding shortcuts. And it's funny that I'm having this conversation with you today, because I want to start by asking you, in this modern age of answers being so abundant, what is being more scarce?
The ability to ask clever questions, probably.
Okay.
So one of the challenges our current generation of AI has is it spits out very confident sounding answers, but they aren't always correct, right? There is, and there probably will be for several years yet, a need to verify the output that AI is giving you. And over time, as we get good at verifying the output, to systematizing that into better and better prompts that we can put into AI so that we get better responses. But the truth is that the current generation of AI that we have right now produces output that sounds very intelligent, but sometimes it's missing a piece, right? So sometimes if you don't explicitly ask it for evidence on the other side of the equation, or what you forgot to ask about it, it'll just answer very specifically the question you asked, but it won't create the whole comprehensive picture. And that's all about the way the AI works, right? It's a statistical pattern matcher of language and language only, but it doesn't have any underlying understanding of the content domains that you're asking about. So it can be very narrow in providing responses.
Mm-hmm.
Train ourselves to ask intelligent questions about, are you considering everything? What about the other side of the coin? Was that the best match you could find or just the most popular one on the internet, and a variety of other sort of critical thinking kinds of questions to make sure that we're getting the best responses out of it. And a lot of times that is challenging because unless you've been schooled in some kind of very disciplined critical thinking, like maybe auditors are or scientists are, it's super hard to spot if you're not already an expert in the field. Experts have a much easier time spotting the little fallacies just because of the accumulation of their experience with something. But the rest of us, we type something in, it answers it, and it sounds great. So we just go with it.
Yeah, and it's for the last 10 years or so, like internet search has been our go-to to find anything really. And back then, because it just lists a bunch of articles, the ones that are on the top are also getting more hits. So in a way, the answers are already biased. And then if you don't know how to ask clever questions, let's say you want to prove that something is true or not, you don't search, is XYZ real? Because all you're going to get is, yes, these are real, and like all these evidence, quote unquote evidence, whether or not they're true. And because AI sound promising, it makes them more believable that whatever it's saying is true, unless you are a little bit more critical. But like you said, how do I know how to be critical?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could use as an example, we just had a World Cup here in the United States, right?
Yeah, I have been following every single match I can.
There you go. Yeah, and a lot of Americans aren't all that familiar with world football, as it's called. So you could easily imagine someone like, I don't know, say my mom, type in some question about Lionel Messi, and then saying, by the way, I'm curious, like, who's won the most World Cups? And let's say the AI spit back the answer, well, Brazil has run the most, they've won 5, and then Argentina, and then Uruguay. Now, my mom would know that wasn't the right answer, right? She'd either have to be very clever about interrogating the AI to say, that doesn't seem right. That's all from South America. Is there no other part of the world that ever produced a World Cup? Or if she was more familiar with world soccer, she might be like, wait a minute, I'm quite sure I've heard at some point that Germany or Italy had won a World Cup or two, right? And so you'd have to interrogate it, and then it would confidently say, oh yes, I was only looking at South America. Sorry, because you answered you asked a question about an Argentinian player at first. But it's that kind of thing. Like, you wouldn't know to ask the question unless you either had the experience or you're very disciplined in knowing how to interrogate AI.
Or you're very curious. So
Right.
for people like us, like we have lived through the age and we have worked in the age without AI, or online search is not even that prevalent. But for someone who hasn't really lived through having to exercise that skill, to be completely honest, I'm really worried about the upcoming generation, how they can develop their skills. And I know you wrote about how AI is hollowing out what AI is replacing. Let's dig into that a little bit. First of all, what do you mean by AI is hollowing out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so right now, the career level that AI is largely replacing with all these companies that are laying off folks because of anticipated productivity coming out of AI are mostly early career. It's really affecting early career, especially in the sort of knowledge worker early career area. And so the challenge becomes a couple of things for that. Typically, our career pyramid, our hierarchical kinds of career ladder has fewer people at the top, more people at the bottom. So, it's a pyramid. But if you hollow out the group at the bottom, it starts to turn more and more into sort of a diamond, right? Where there's few people at the bottom, a lot in the middle. So that creates an organizational challenge, because where is the next generation of the fat middle coming from, right? If there just aren't as many people on the bottom, because we tend to lose people along the way. The second challenge is for those who are left in those early careers. The AI is taking away a lot of the formative experiences from which we generate the ability to create expertise and judgment, right? It may not be glamorous, those early years of your career, but they're actually pretty critical to your developing expertise. All of the various experiences that you see, all the cases, all the examples, all the variety of whatever you're typing in or you're analyzing or you're processing, it actually generates sort of a great big case library in your head of examples. That is exactly where judgment and expertise comes from. So the question is, if you spend 3 or 4 years now in that bottom part of this new career diamond, and you're not getting those formative experiences, how do you ever develop the expertise to be a good supervisor or someone who's capable of evaluating the output of AI in the first place? Because you're not getting to see the mistakes. You're not learning from those mistakes as well.
Now, I know you work with organizations a lot, and we are sort of still kind of in the beginning phase of AI having a real impact in both the way we work and how employees develop. Are there any early patterns that you're noticing already from the people who are inside these organizations?
Yeah. So organizationally, I've worked with some, in particular, one of the first industry groups that is facing this very, very immediately is audit companies. And that's partially because in the United States, the regulatory body is concerned about exactly this phenomenon, and they have, issued a regulation that is going to require audit companies to demonstrate how they're going to develop judgment in an AI age, how to make sure that the auditors are capable of spotting the kinds of financial errors if they are in fact going to replace early careers with AI review of financial statements. And so they're on the hook to actually build a systemic solution to this problem, right? So essentially, people learn from a sort of apprenticeship model working, directly under a master. They would do the work papers and the supervisor would review it and point out all the little mistakes they're making. But now an AI tool is supposed to be doing that for them in large part. And so they're developing these sort of parallel systems to try to replace what's being missed. Some of that is with simulation-based learning, and some of it is with more targeted sort of internal job assignments that are developmental in nature, like little internships, shadow assignments, stretch assignments, working on projects that are trying to troubleshoot AI output, all kinds of different internal projects where people have additional opportunities early in their career to try to replace what the AI is taking away.
So would you say it's sort of like they're still needed to do their work without AI? It's just so imagine a junior person, how you learn the ropes. They still need to do that. It's just instead of having the manager or whoever's above them check, they have AI check.
Yeah, or in some cases, they send the financial statements first through the AI system, and the AI system sort of says, here's what I see in this financial statement with a sort of recommendation or a confidence level kind of thing, right? So I think this number looks a little off, you should check it, or this number didn't have a receipt behind it, you should check it. But the real question is, when the AI is wrong for one reason or another, how does that entry-level person know that it's wrong, right? Because they haven't spent years seeing the most typical patterns of where mistakes happen on financial statements, and that's their job to find. So yeah, so they still need to do that bit, and they're doing their best to troubleshoot what the AI is spitting out. But in order to gain the expertise to do that, they're developing these parallel systems, extra training, basically, of either simulation training or on-the-job training, these additional opportunities to try to learn what, gain these sort of all these other examples that they can reason from.
Yeah, and you work a lot with developing talents. And funnily enough, I am also in L&D. So, but we develop skills, like we come at it in different angles. The company that I'm working at right now, it's more developing empathy and curiosity aspect. So you have witnessed how people actually develop. So we talked about actually learning, actually doing the things. How else do people develop the skills and judgment they need for their job or in life?
Well, judgment is a combination of different skills. So like if as a learning designer, if you were to break it down into the sub skills and micro skills, there's some level of discipline with developing judgment, the core analytic skills to notice the right things, to ask the right questions, to break down things into parts and question them, the sort of structured critical thinking and problem solving skills, structured decision making skills, all those kinds of things are all teachable as a discipline of critical thinking. But on top of that, like, none of that is worth very much unless you also have just a rich library of experience to draw from. Because the truth is, most expertise over time isn't just the application of disciplined analysis and thinking. It's that plus, I understand this state space. So if we go back to our World Cup analogy, anyone who has seen hundreds of professional soccer matches will be better at reasoning how the game is going, who is likely to win, who the best players are, than someone who's watching their first game, right? Even without the discipline of the critical thinking skills. So it's both. You need the state space of experience, and then on top of that, you need that disciplined thinking. That's really where expertise comes from, the combination of the two. Because most of the time, when we say judgment, if you think about like all the various ways that we use the word judgment, it's usually when there's something missing, there's something fuzzy, right? It's both answers could be right, it depends on the circumstances, or I don't have a complete picture of exactly what's going on, or oh my God, there's so many things, so many variables to think about, I can't quite break it down into a disciplined matrix to make a decision. So one way or another, we interpose our judgment, right? We'd say it's a judgment call at some point, right? We have to use some human intuition to fill in what's missing. And that part so like the discipline of critical thinking will get us so far, but that last bit at filling in the blanks is very much a human skill. It's not something that computers have just yet. And most of that comes from experts reasoning from what they've seen before. This situation has some sort of pattern that reminds me of this situation. And so I think the missing pieces will be like this other situation, right? I've seen a team like Argentina play a team like Spain before, and this is what I've seen as the results in the past. So therefore, I think Spain has the advantage, right? Things like that. That's the essence of judgment, right? Is that sort of reasoning from one case to another, saying this is a close match, and sort of adapting our experience, and then having a disciplined way of saying, of questioning that match to say, well, what's different about these two situations in this circumstance? What's the last time I saw these two teams play, there were different players. It was 3 years ago. What's changed since then? What might be different, right? And that's where the discipline kicks back in.
So it boils down to being critical and curious. Like curious just about all the details that are relevant. Critical, meaning you don't just take things at face value.
Yep.
And I certainly see curiosity being a higher and higher priority when it comes to companies wanting to develop their people. It's not easy to be curious. Like, there are inquisitive people, and then there are not so inquisitive people. And it applies to all levels too. You can be junior and curious. You can be mid-senior and not curious. Let's talk about the mid-level.
Okay.
What are some things that you notice that they are lacking, or what would someone have to check themselves in order to stay relevant or not get laid off or be able to keep up with the current technology trend?
Well, the first thing I would say about the layoff part is, here's an interesting tidbit about history. For most of the last 40 years, organizations have been on a small mission to get rid of middle management in one way or another. Like, we've been flattening organizations and automating out the middle layers and offshoring different groups. And, there's been a small campaign to get rid of the middle through a variety of different things. But suddenly, and maybe ironically, those folks in the middle, because of AI, are in the highest demand probably in the last 40 years, because they have the expertise that is desperately needed to do the oversight, to create the better prompts, to put in the systems, to do the checking of the output. And so the first thing I would say for folks in the middle is, don't give that away cheaply. Like, that is of tremendous value right now. Understand that, like, you have more organizational value, whether you're a candidate being hired by someone or you're in a company doing it. Companies are going to be leveraging your expertise more than ever before. They want to write it down. They want to get it programmed in. They want to build it into the prompts. Recognize that there's a degree of job security that is that you have with that, at least up until the moment where they figure out a way to get the AI to recognize it and encode it.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the first thing I would say. The second piece about like what do they need to be doing for their own career is, I mean, the second big piece of this whole thing is the systems thinking, right? Because mostly, yeah, well, because mostly at the moment we've been talking just about an individual person and what their individual development, their individual interaction with AI, but this is part of a broader ecosystem. So, for example, to use an L&D example, if you look at the whole sort of talent development chain, value chain across all of talent, right? It's more than just going to a learning class, right? You go to a learning class and then we have various ways of assessing what you know, whether it's multiple choice tests or performance reviews. And in a perfect organization, that would be captured somewhere. So we know what skills you have, and not all organizations do that today, but that's the whole skills-based thing where we capture that and then we use it for certain talent decisions, such as, are they a good match for this project? Are they ready for promotion? Would they make a good sponsor or coach? Would they be a good candidate to be an instructor in a class? All these various talent decisions that might be built off of that. That is a set of systems that we don't really have today, specifically around these sort of judgment and leadership kinds of skills. Most of the training we have today, and this is just built on the assumptions of the underlying work, are very transactional in their skills. Very, can I produce the work product? Can I process the form? Right? We do a lot of knowledge teaching, day one onboarding, and transactional skills. But these higher level judgment skills and critical thinking skills, they've up till now, they've kind of been reserved for very special training programs targeted at leaders.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's not a lot of leaders, we haven't been developing them at scale. And by the way, those programs are wonderful where they exist, but they tend to be very, very high touch, like these high potential development, management fast track program kind of things. They often involve like rotations and, being personally mentored and all kinds of other excellent things, but that doesn't scale to tens of thousands of employees very well. So what the organization needs, especially if you're in that middle tier, is people who have the systems thinking to think about, let's think about this from a more systemic, how are we developing an entire talent value chain that is now optimized for judgment skills? We're going to have to tweak our learning so that it teaches it. We're going to have to tweak our measurement so that it measures it. We're going to have to tweak our skills capture and skills systems so that we can connect it to jobs and projects and tasks and promotion decisions, right, in the HR systems. What is the systems level thinking that connects all these parts so we can have an organizational solution, not just the, above and beyond the individual judgments that you have to make every day about a particular output from AI.
And where do you think we are in the market in making the switch to more skills-based talent development? Early, middle?
Oh, very early.
Very early.
Very early. Yeah. I told a story in one of the things that I posted online on Substack. In 1991, when I was a junior, I interned for a company that was building what they were calling at the time an automobile navigation system. Very, very early engineering prototype for what is today our GPS navigating kind of tech. And obviously everybody, it was pretty groundbreaking at the time, and all the engineers were like, this is going to completely change how people drive their cars and everything. It took about 5 years before I started to see that prototype in high-end vehicles, built directly into the dashboards of high-end vehicles. In another 10 years, there was this massive explosion where you could buy these little like Garmin or devices that you would sort of put on your windshield or something, and then everybody could go buy this separate device. And of course, today we all have it on our phone as an app that is free, right? That is not an unusual technology adoption timeline, right? To go from early sort of scientific prototype all the way through high end but limited until we can learn out the processes and mass production so that it eventually gets, more and more widespread and eventually becomes so ubiquitous. Like it's just, who has a calculator anymore? We have a phone, right?
Yeah.
Who has a separate phone anymore? I mean, a separate camera anymore, right? It's all embedded in something else. So I suspect AI will work the same way, right? We're still in that sort of early prototype stage when I was an intern, right?
Yeah.
These are our first steps into using this technology. We've got a long way to go before it all, and skills tech too. Like, we've got a long way to go before we figure out the right way to use it and how to use it at scale and how to check its output at scale. So I know there's, lots of companies that are starting along this journey are feeling pain. But that's the pain that comes from being an early adopter. It's just part of the journey. Like, we'll all figure it out.
Yeah. And I think we have experienced many different technology revolution. AI just hits differently because it's so accessible so quickly, and it changes so much quicker. It probably doesn't take 10 years for it to get from the prototype to what we have on our phone. And so for people who are just graduating or maybe even younger, what should they do to prepare themselves so that they don't become just someone who knows how to ask something and spit out an answer and just run with it, not even knowing how to critique it?
Yeah, that's another good question. I mean, so a couple thoughts. Number one, it like, for the foreseeable future, learning more about how AI actually works is going to be very useful information. So whatever a young person can do to sort of understand the logic of AI systems and how they work and how they operate will help them spot the shortcomings of it more quickly. Number two, domain expertise is going to continue to be valuable.
It's priceless.
Yeah. So regardless of AI, lawyers are still going to need to know the code of laws.
Yeah.
Doctors are still going to need to know basic science. Engineers are still going to need to know basic engineering skills. Like, all that stuff is still hugely important, and it doesn't go away. But sort of if you look at any list of the most in-demand skills, a lot of them are, the way I think of it is, AI quietly turns us all into consultants of a sort. Because if you look at the list of skills that you typically see as in most demand around the world, they are starting to resemble more and more sort of entry-level consulting skills. Process analysis, systems thinking, critical thinking, problem solving, stakeholdering, change management. It's fascinating to see those skills that were once like super specialized around certain job types sort of become more ubiquitous now, because it's almost as if everybody is becoming a manager, because even entry-level employees now will have AI agents that almost function as a team of people beneath them. And so now you need to orchestrate that team. And it's so all that sort of management and consultative kinds of skills that are needed to make the whole system work. Right? So you need to make the AI agents work for you. You need to figure out how to organize them into a process that does something which resembles process analysis a lot. You need a hierarchy of how they're arranged, which resembles organizational design a lot. So it's fascinating how they're very applicable that way.
And it sounds like a positive thing, because you are almost stepping in, developing the skills that you normally, or 20 years ago, you don't get to do that until you're 5-10 years into your career.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer to be optimistic, right? I prefer
That's
to
all
see
we can do, really.
Yeah, it's not like this tool is going to make us all a little bit dumber. I'd prefer to think, but think of the flip side of that. Like, in order to make it work, we're all going to have to make ourselves a bunch smarter.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's the flip side of the same opportunity, and I suspect that the most successful individuals and organizations are going to take that approach and be like, look, there's just a tremendous opportunity here. If we use these tools in the right way and we're clever about how we implement them, that will actually make ourselves more intelligent. We'll use the AI to help us think better. We'll use the AI to help us troubleshoot when something is missing, when we forgot to ask the next question. It'll prompt us to do more thorough thinking. And that's where I see the greatest advantage for this tech.
Yeah. For people who are they don't have the initiative to just think for themselves, I think that will continue with or without AI. They are always just going to ask someone without doing the thinking themselves.
Yeah.
So learning how to embrace the technology and adopt it properly for yourself in the organization is probably the more important thing to do. Now, have you seen leaders who have done it very well, like adopting AI in a good way to develop their own
I mean, we're
organization?
still so very early in the process. I mean,
Mhm.
most organizations, so what you've got going on now in a lot of organizations is you've got an IT group that's very advanced in terms of taking the new tech and testing it out and answering all
Mhm.
the important questions about, how do we protect our confidentiality? How do we protect against cybersecurity? How do we, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the questions. What's our, AI governance going to be and our AI ethical, standpoint going to be around this tech? So you've got certain advanced groups, usually very tech heavy kinds of groups that are sort of pushing it. You do have other organizations that are starting to roll out sort of enterprise wide AI adoption, whether that's a tool like, audit companies have very specific tools that they're rolling out now that help specifically with audit. But also you've got lots of organizations that
Mhm.
are just sort of rolling out, let's say, Copilot or Claude, sort of enterprise wide. And
Mhm.
most of them are
Mhm.
going through sort of basic tier one adoption kind of training to that, just
Play around with
how to
it.
get people over the first barrier of this tool terrifies me kind of training, right? How do I actually use
Mhm.
it?
Mhm.
And how do I gain just enough confidence that I'm comfortable experimenting with it because you've taught me enough about how to use it and how to, make sure I don't do anything that causes issues, right? That I'm confident that I have a
Mhm. Mhm.
sandbox that's safe and a set of prompts and questions I can work with. And so then I can get curious working with it. And so a lot of organizations are at that phase right now. They're nowhere near the systemic kinds of advancements that we were just
Mhm.
talking
Mhm.
about, right? They're at basic level one, roll out a new tool and try to get it adopted.
Mhm. Because we're in this early phase, now is the time to do things right. What should organizations and leaders be aware of in order to not weaken their own employees while adopting AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think other than the technical pieces, which the technology experts have to take care of the security bits and the confidentiality bits and all that sort of stuff. But other than that, just in terms of rolling this out to a workforce, it's probably creating a system where people can learn from one another, the do's and don'ts, the things that work,
Mhm.
the things
Mhm.
that don't, but especially sort of the best prompts to get
Mhm.
certain core tasks done. So you can release this into a
Mhm.
company. That's one thing to do, and then just let everybody do their own independent thing. But it would be much better if Karen figured out a really great prompt for searching a database full of customers for a particular kind of transaction that seems to work really well, and she's actually gone through it a few times to make sure that it's getting everything and not leaving anything out. Great.
Mhm.
Everybody else would love to see that prompt and use it. How do we have a system in place that helps Karen say, hey, I think I've got something that's working pretty well, and then sort of curate it and review it and maybe standardize it over time.
Mhm.
But then by the same token, also trying to figure out some way to figure out, and how was it that Karen actually came up with that? Like, what were the thinking process? What were the system of questions that she asked in the first place to get her to that wonderful prompt?
Yeah.
Like how did she ask? How did she check for confirmation bias or availability bias or anchoring bias or all these other kinds of mistakes that
Mhm.
critical thinking mistakes that people make? Maybe we ought to start teaching that stuff more systemically,
Mhm.
so that we're not just teaching level one. This is how you make the tool work, but it's how do you make the tool work
Mhm.
and create a system of way to review the output.
Mhm. Yeah.
One of the weird things about AI is that it sort of flips the nature of work on its head in terms of up until now, even in the knowledge workspace, if we had a lot of work to do, um, there was so much effort involved in creating something that we spent a lot of time planning up front,
Mhm.
a lot of discipline with the planning and making sure we don't go off track because we
Mhm.
couldn't afford to spend weeks or months building something out only to figure out we were going down the wrong path. The challenge with generative AI
Yeah.
is that it generates. You give it a few instructions and off it goes, right? It builds the whole
Yeah.
thing out.
Uh-huh.
And it can get off track and go 2 or 3 steps and skip steps in the middle and get off track.
Mhm. Mhm.
Which
Mhm.
means that now the way we are going to be working is the reverse. It's not as much upfront planning. It's a lot of much more time debugging on
Mhm.
the backside,
Mhm.
at least
Mhm.
and until we developed the expertise to start building in constraints and guardrails in our prompts up front so that when it, goes off and starts generating a bunch of stuff, the first draft is closer and closer and closer to what the ultimate draft would be. But right now, AI has a habit of sort of spitting out a solution that it looks 80% correct on its first response.
Yeah.
But if you're really troubleshooting it for the right answer, you're spending a lot more than 20% of your time on the back end correcting it, right?
Yes.
For the moment, until we get back to a place where what we're putting in the prompts in the first place generates more and more and more accurate first drafts, right?
Yeah, the 20% is more like 60.
Yeah.
So the whole thing ended up taking 150%.
Yeah.
Of the
No,
time.
I mean, and I'm sure lots of people have the experience of, ask the question and it spit out this wonderful document or PowerPoint deck or Excel spreadsheet or whatever, and it looks so complete.
Promising, yeah.
Right. But then when you started to notice little mistakes here and there and you asked the AI, change that font or change that number or whatever, it took forever to actually get it to its final state, right? And again, we'll figure out lots of interesting ways around that over time. In some cases, we may find that AI is more customized to some of the tools we use, like Excel and PowerPoint and blah, 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 blah. In some cases, we may find we need to move our presentation into a more code-friendly form, like we may start, maybe we don't deliver so many things with the PowerPoint presentation. Maybe there'll be HTML-based presentations, for example, because the code just works more efficiently in its own native language than when it has to translate into an application. So we'll figure it out. Like it'll take time. Every company will have to play with their own systems to optimize it.
Yeah, it will take time, but doing things right now will save us a lot of tech debt or trouble down the road. And I'm so glad you pointed out, like, it's important for, let's say, Karen shared this prompt that worked well and everyone started using it. The equally important skill is to understand how Karen came up with that. Because that's the kind of skill that they need. Because I'm sure they cannot use the same prompt every single situation. Every situation will be slightly different.
Yep.
So without that knowledge of how you structure the prompt or what information it gives AI, you won't be able to solve your own problem.
Well, that's the other part that goes with this, because again, like anything else, right, it's got sort of ever expanding layers of implications. A lot of companies have especially in the early parts of careers, a culture that is very sort of efficiency focused and process focused, and like, try to get through as many of these calls as you can, try to get through as many forms as you can. And for a while we're implementing AI, we're going to have to create a culture that is much more curious, interrogative, and collaborative, right? So we're going to need people to spend more time asking critical questions about the output they're getting from AI and sharing those things and working collaboratively. It's going to reorganize work. I've actually been using a metaphor of late to try to describe that, which is, if you remember process flow diagrams, which became really big in the 80s, but you had these little rectangles, which was sort of the transactional tasks, like, gather the information about a new customer. And then, they always led to these diamonds, which were the decision point. If they're creditworthy, give them an application. If they're not, send a denial letter. Well, AI is actually automating most of those rectangles. So what remains, if you were to actually to design the work, is mostly a bunch of diamonds, just a bunch of judgments, a bunch of judgment calls, one after the other. And what's really interesting about a workflow of diamonds only is the order starts to matter much, much less. So you end up having these networks of interrelated diamonds. If I was actually doing process map, right, it would just be a network of diamonds and then an outer row of more diamonds and then an outer row of more diamonds, each one set of judgments sort of escalating to the next. And so it really changes the whole notion of how we're representing work and how people are doing their work. And a lot of that, as you said, like you would need to change the culture from a step-by-step, I do what's in front of me, I follow the instructions, I go step by step, to a much more sort of curious, interrogative kind of culture. And one where Karen can say, I think I figured out the way to navigate these diamonds. That's, you should try out. It's really working well for me.
Yeah. And it's encouraging people to try to figure things out themselves. Yeah. Because it's becoming a lot less waterfall. So I have a project management background. So when you were answering, I just thought of the waterfall versus agile. It's not exactly the same, but it's not step by step. You're kind of doing things simultaneously, almost like iterative, simultaneously, trial and error.
Well, there's no doubt that the culture that accompanies agile methodology is much more consistent than the culture that typically follows a sort of stepwise waterfall kind of thing, which again is a very step by step, one step at a time kind of methodology, which is great when we're doing, again, when I get back to when we had to, a lot of the reason we did things that way is because we couldn't afford to spend months programming the wrong solution, only to realize after the fact that we didn't hit the right answer. Agile was specifically created so that we could quickly iterate and try to get feedback to make sure that we were going down the right path. Right. And not spend a lot of time with over analyzing out front and building the whole thing all at once, right? But building little pieces one at a time with quick iteration cycles. Very similar culturally in terms of the kind of thinking to what we're talking about, right? A more experimentative, iterative, interrogative kinds of process. And that is a very similar kind of cultural shift.
So for people who are just starting out, what would you suggest them to do to prepare them and to not lose these important moments that maybe you and I had to go through to learn things to help us with our judgment today?
Well, I suppose two things. Number one, there's always an opportunity for new people to become expert in tech. There's sort of a general truism that, like, because there's less for new people to unlearn, you are more likely to become an expert in new tech than someone who's been working in old tech for a long time, has to forget everything that they've learned about old tech and learn new tech. Everybody can learn new tech. I want to make that very clear. It doesn't matter like how many years you've been doing something, you can always learn something new. But sometimes people who are new to the tech adopt things more quickly because they just have less to unlearn. So if you become an expert in some of these new AI tools, on your own, independently, that's, hugely advantageous because that sort of jumpstarts a little bit of this person is obviously going to come up to speed more quickly. The other bit would just be, it's sort of a personal culture of, like you called it, curiosity, right? Is to understand that in an iterative world, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Mistakes are opportunities to learn, right? The advice I used to give to consultants coming up through the ranks for years when I was a career advisor is, you're going to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. That's fine. Just commit yourself to, I'm not going to make that particular mistake twice. Sooner or later, you will run out of mistakes. You will be surprised that over the course of 3 to 5 years, all the mistakes you see will start looking familiar. You'll actually run out. There's not an infinite number of mistakes you can make doing the same thing over and over again. And again, that's where we get to the development of expertise. You have to be committed to learning from your mistakes. So first and foremost, you have a personal culture where you accept your own mistakes and you commit yourself to learn from them. And then second, an organizational culture that doesn't punish people for learning, right? That encourages it,
Yeah, it's making mistake and learning from it. You have to be able to make mistakes first. And I think that's a lot of like our modern world now. It's taking a lot of that friction away. As you make mistakes, you learn, you develop. I think things have gotten so much easier. It's a lot harder to make some kind of mistakes that's actually beneficial to your formative years.
Yep.
Okay, so for this last part, I want to play a rapid fire round of questions. Quick answers, whatever comes to mind. Just a fun way to wrap up our episode. So first one, what do you do first when you need an answer?
I mean, I ask AI. I do. This is where I start. It's usually a starting point that I ask AI, and then I start interrogating whether I believe the answer.
Well, it gives you a head start, at least.
Yeah.
Hey. What's one thing you deliberately choose to not delegate to AI?
Human interaction. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, anything to do with interacting with people is like that. The human equation is still utterly so. Teaching, coaching, uh, sales conversations, all that sort of stuff. Like developing personal relationships from a leadership perspective, all the human stuff that AI still can't do any of that stuff, and it's still hugely critical to everyday business.
Yeah. And like, let's say you have a St. Charles group AI talking to your client's AI. That's not
Right.
meaningful.
Yeah. No.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that happens more and more, right? Like you hear about it in the news all the time, the idea of AI generated resumes being evaluated by AI generated
Yeah.
algorithms. And there comes a
Yeah.
point where like, you're like, we have in the name of efficiency cut out the most important part of this whole thing, which is the recruiter actually talking to the candidate. This is
Yeah.
the critical thing that you
Yeah.
want to happen, right?
Yeah. So companies, it's very important to not outsource that,
Right.
or at least keep the human in there. Have
Yep.
the AI help you. Okay. Next one. One piece of career advice that you think is outdated now.
It's outdated. Oh, well, I mean, if we're talking broadly about careers, working your way up from the bottom
Mm.
as sort of the best way to advance your career may not necessarily be true anymore.
Mm-hmm.
For a variety of reasons. Number one, for a variety of reasons, contracting and freelancing is a much more viable option than at one point it was. And it continues to get more viable over time. Secondly, I mean, it is a well documented experience that has been going on for over the past decade, where a lot of people feel like their best opportunity for advancement is actually to leave their current employer and get hired at a higher
Mm.
level someplace else. And that has a lot to do, again, with the career pyramid. Every time you try to move up, you have multiple people all competing
Limited
for that,
space.
that one slot, and it's
Mm.
hard. So a lot of people have decided that, like, I'll just look for an already open position that's someplace else. And that's like, otherwise I have to wait for years for this person to retire. And that is becoming pretty mainstream at this point. That, the
Mm-hmm.
job hopping used to be a bad thing. 30 years ago, when I was looking for a job, it was considered a bad thing to have on your resume, a lot of job hopping. But I don't think recruiters even look at it that way anymore. It's so common at this point. So yeah, those would be the two that jump to mind most quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you pick up more skills by doing freelance fractional work too,
Yeah,
because you work
or
in different
side gigs. A lot
environments.
of people have like side hustles. All of those things
Mm-hmm.
are
Yeah.
wonderful opportunities for you to develop yourself. Like, no one says you have to just sort of join the company, take the company training, slowly march your way up the company ladder. Admittedly, there still are some industries that, for a variety of structural reasons, like they just work that way. You're not going to be able to shortcut it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a nurse or a
Mm-hmm.
doctor, it can be more difficult to, like, you have to learn what you have to learn in a particular cascade.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
an awful lot, and certainly in like tech, like side hustles and jumping around in jobs and freelancing are all eminently possible kinds of ways to advance your career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I am in that boat. I'm doing like fractional work and side gig and getting involved in different things that are not in the same industry, and it's developing
Yep.
very different skill set. Okay, last one. What's one word you hope defines the next generation of leaders?
Integrity.
Integrity.
Yeah. If I
In
had to pick one,
like how so?
I suppose this. Well, I was gonna maybe go with systems thinking or integrity, but um, I it's just that the whole technology. It feels like every 15 years or so, like we completely reinvent our economic model because a piece of technology comes along that is so transformative. We rapidly have to adopt the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
If you think about the cycle of the personal computer in the mid 80s, the internet in the, turn of the millennium time frame, the smartphones about a decade later. Sure. And then, in the early 2020s, we had AI, and like this cycle of like, oh my God, this changes everything. We all tend to respond to those massive changes because they're so big, like in very narrow ways. And sometimes we don't always see in our zeal to get an immediate solution, like what the systemic effects are going to be over time. Right. And so sometimes we have created things that like, the way we solved that problem, that actually created some problems that we didn't really think through at the time. And if I had it to do over again, we would have done it differently. Right. Now, in the industrial age, because everything moves more slowly, we did that. And then we had massive resets, right? We created things like, so for example, the fact that audit companies exists and the SEC exists, and we have all these regulations around making sure that financial statements are true and accurate is all built on the premise that the higher order financial systems like stock exchanges and stuff don't work if everybody's lying about how much money the company is making. Right. Those have to be accurate for the whole system to work. There has to be a basic system of there is truth in the reporting. And so we created this massive infrastructure of accounting to validate the fact that like how much money a company makes is both transparent and accurate. I'm not sure what the whole system of an AI mediated world in an interconnected internet economy is, but there may come a point where we come to realize something foundational like that too, right? Where we have to sort of step back and say, look, in order for this whole system to work, we need some foundational pieces that we know are rock solid. And we don't always invent them when we're constantly churning to adjust to the next new technology and the next new one. Like we barely figure out one and then we have to adjust to the next. And so I sort of think the combination of systems thinking with the integrity to be able to sort of say, where do we want this? How do we want this whole system to work? And what is the sort of right answer, not just for my immediate profit, but the whole ecosystem of business and economy to work? Some combination of those two things is what I would like to see.
That's a great answer. Like, let's see if we do have a body that kind of governs that. Or maybe that model doesn't apply to the AI world and our AI transformation.
I don't know. But what I know is we just don't have enough people thinking about it. Because we're all so focused on, oh my God, how do I make this thing spit out a PowerPoint that answers the client's question, or a spreadsheet that just gives me an accurate answer.
Yeah, I feel like we are in that struggling phase a little bit. Whenever a new model comes, like we go through that, like, okay, how do I do this now? But what a great way to finish our episode. I hope it becomes true. Like integrity is what defines our next generation of leaders. And thank you very much, Craig, for spending time with me today. It's great to hear your insights.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, and now definitely leave your information in the show notes so anyone interested can get in touch with Craig or myself and have a deeper conversation.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of MindBlend. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to follow or share it with anyone who needs to hear it, or support me on Patreon. And let's keep the conversation going. Connect with me on social media or leave me a comment. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and let's continue to blend our minds and discover what's possible.